When the scoop is open, a jaywalker simply can't get run over, and sometimes that's more than he deserves.
Hello guys, welcome back to our channel. Today we've got something really special for you. We've stumbled across a treasure trove of 100 more colorized eerie photos that aren't suitable for all viewers. And let me tell you, they're terrifying.
I am delighted to be here, and I'm particularly delighted to be here on this occasion.
Number 100, bomb shelter in Helsinki. During World War II, the capital of Finland was subject to near constant bombings by the Soviet Army. The campaigns lasted from 1939 to 1944, something that turned the rumble of a bomb and the following destruction into a strangely normal way of life. Number 99, Buchenwald concentration camp. The horrors of World War II are most present. The horrors of World War II are most present in the face of these concentration camp prisoners. Life in Buchenwald, as it was in every camp, was a waking nightmare. From the forced labor to the gas and the barely there rations, every day was filled with a new miserable experience. Number 98, stock market crash of 1929. America faced one of its lowest lows on October 29, 1929, when Wall Street investors traded nearly 16 million shares on the New York Stock Exchange, losing billions of dollars and breaking thousands of investors in one day. Number 97, Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield. This photo that rocked the world is one of the most well-known shots of the creation of a frenemy that Hollywood has ever birthed. With Sophia Loren's head perched directly next to Jane Mansfield's hefty chest, it looks like Mansfield crashed a party that Loren didn't even know was happening. Number 96, Into the Jaws of Death. On June 6, 1944, soldiers from America, England, and Canada stormed the beaches of Normandy in order to take the beaches back from the German army. Most of the soldiers went into the fray without knowing exactly what they were doing. They just knew that many of them wouldn't be coming home. Number 95, Marilyn Monroe. Taken by silent film star Harold Lloyd, this saucy photo of Marilyn Monroe was taken for Life magazine at her apartment. It was the first of many photographic collaborations between the two, and just a year later, they worked together on an entire swimsuit spread at Lloyd's estate, Green Acres. Number 94, 16-year-old German crying soldier. You'll be hard-pressed to find a photo from World War II that isn't emotionally affecting. This snapshot of a 16-year-old German soldier, Hans-Georg Henke, after he was captured by the U.S. Ninth Army on April 3, 1945, shows the depths that the German army sank to in order to build their numbers. Number 93, Odd Threesome. There's something fun about this photo of these three luminaries at the top of their field. Aside from being the tallest, smallest, and biggest people on the planet, what do you think that these men had to talk about? Aside from their bets, of course. Number 92, Welcome to the Jungle. The queen of drag racing, Jungle Pam, was the reason that most ancillary fans of the sport got into it in the first place. After all, there's nothing like watching a sexy babe in hot pants working on a car before it tears off across the blacktop. Unpacking Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is one of the most, if not the most, well-known and beloved paintings in the world, and it's been stolen multiple times, but during World War II, the painting was sitting pretty in the Louvre, meaning that it had to be kept safe from the Nazis. Number 90, Carl Ackley. There's never been a taxidermist who's as cool as Carl Ackley, a turn-of-the-century explorer and jack-of-all-trades who lived through brutal encounters with animals that he loved while on safaris throughout Africa. Number 89, Young Brigitte Bardot. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't have a crush on Brigitte Bardot. A cinema idol for multiple generations of people, she knew exactly how her status as a sexy ingenue affected the audience, and she sculpted her persona to squeeze the most out of every performance. Number 88, a farewell photo of English soldiers. The smiling faces of these young men belies the horrible predicament that they've been put in. Following Hitler's invasion of Poland on September 3, 1939, Britain and France declared war on Germany and sent their troops to the front for what turned out to be more than 5 years of growing turmoil. Number 87, Ruby Bridges. At the tender age of 6 years old, Ruby Bridges is one of the youngest and most important members of the civil rights movement. In November 1960, she became the first black student to integrate into an elementary school in the South. In order to attend classes, she had to be escorted by federal marshals due to threats against her safety. Number 86. The Kiss of Life. Taken in 1967 by Rocco Morabito, The Kiss of Life captured the once-in-a-lifetime shot of utility worker J.D. Thompson saving his co-worker, Randall G. Champion, with mouth-to-mouth after he touched a low-voltage line. Number 85. A German soldier in World War I. One of the most nightmarish parts of World War I was trench warfare, a part of the battle that every country in the battle took part in. The military tactic goes back to the Civil War and sees soldiers digging out deep ditches that serve as a protective defense, as well as a last stand for anyone who finds himself doing battle in the trench. Number 84. Battle of the Somme. World War I is famous for trench warfare, one of the most dangerous and harrowing forms of battle that's ever existed. The Battle of the Somme raged from July to November 1916, an incredibly long time for a non-stop street fight between the British and the Germans. Number 83. American Civil War Camp. This shot from the Civil War is like looking into the past. While the black and white version of this shot is definitely a fascinating look, it's nothing like peering nearly 200 years into the past in stunning color. Number 82. Charlie Chaplin and Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein wasn't the kind of egghead who just liked to pal around with other scientists and talk math all day. He was imaginative, funny, and he thought of himself as an artist, so it makes sense that he enjoyed Chaplin's work. Number 81. Paratroopers of Easy Company, also known as the Band of Brothers. During his decade-plus reign of terror over Europe, Hitler amassed a series of homes and chalets that he used for everything from relaxation to planning. And by the end of World War II, American and English forces had seized all of his homes and hideaways for their own use. Number 80. Soviet Marines, 1942. They may not have had the financial backing or the technical machinery of the US military or the Germans, but during World War II, the Soviet Marines were some of the hardest fighting soldiers on the planet. They routinely undertook missions that meant certain death, and they came out on top. Number 79. Lawrence of Arabia. During World War I, Colonel Thomas Edward Lawrence had an extremely unique position in the Middle East. He worked as a British demolition artist, working with Arab rebel allies to attack bridges and isolated depots belonging to the Ottoman Empire. Number 78. Henry Behrens. Measuring at a minuscule 30 inches of height, Henry Behrens was the smallest man in the world during his life. He weighed only about 32 pounds, and he toured the world with Burton Lester's Troop of Little People. Number 77. Japanese-American college students during their relocation to an internment camp. Following the strike against Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the American military clamped down on Japanese Americans and forced them into internment camps on the West Coast that were essentially prisons. Number 76. Wax bullet duel outside of Carnegie Hall in New York. So this is definitely one way to pass the time, although we don't recommend it. Before people had the internet, TV, or a myriad of distractions, they had to make their own fun. One extremely painful way of doing that is by loading up a pair of dueling pistols with wax bullets and pelting one another. Number 75. Koboto Santaro, a Japanese military commander. Taken by Felice Bito, the original version of this photo was hand-colored by the photographer. He preferred to take full-length portraits taken in his studio in order to focus on the traditional costumes and traditions of the culture that fascinated him. Number 74. Soviets charging Leningrad. During World War II, the city of Leningrad was besieged by the German military. They stared at civilians, with thousands of them losing their lives from hunger and hypothermia. This prolonged military blockade lasted for more than 800 days, ending with the Red Army pushing German forces from the southern outskirts of the city. Number 73. Auschwitz-Birkenau. When soldiers from the Soviet Army made their way into Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, the first thing they found was a warehouse full of the belongings of victims of the Nazis. Eyeglasses, pots and pans, prosthetic limbs, and thousands of pairs of shoes. Number 72. Unemployed lumber worker. Hailing from Klamath Falls, Oregon, Thomas Cave and his wife Annie were one of many people who found themselves down on their luck during the Great Depression. According to photographer Dorothea Lang, the Caves had worked for 52 weeks straight, earning $550 total, about $10,000 today. And after renting a small apartment for $12 a month, they both found themselves without a job. Number 71. Sophia Loren. Sophia Loren has been one of the most eye-catching actresses since her debut in the 1951 film Quo Vadis when she was only 17 years old. Since then, she's appeared in a myriad of roles playing sexy seductresses to comedic foils. In all that time, it's never felt like she's made a misstep. Number 70. Homecoming Soldier, Vienna, Austria. Throughout his 40 years as a photographer, Ernest Haas staggered the line between photojournalist and artist. When taking photos of soldiers returning from World War II, it's impossible not to provide some kind of look into history, regardless of the artfulness of the work. Number 69. Adoration of a President-to-be. Following their engagement, John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier went on a trip to the Kennedy family home in Hyannisport on Cape Cod, with a reporter in tow to capture their newly engaged bliss. Number 68. A group of bootblacks gathers around an old Civil War veteran. As strange as it may sound, Civil War veterans were still alive and kicking well into the 20th century. Famously, the last surviving Civil War veteran passed away in 1956, although it's likely that there were a few more kicking around at the same time. Number 67. Mata Hari. An international object of desire, Mata Hari was a dancer, a spy, and everyone who knows about her casts her in a different light. She's been described as a courtesan, a feminist, an espionage wannabe, and a victim of the military's need to create an enemy. Number 66. Winston Churchill as a cornet in the 4th Queen's Hussars Cavalry. The life of Winston Churchill was sculpted by his dedication to Great Britain and its army. As a member of the 4th Queen's Hussars Cavalry, the young Churchill recognized that he was serving during the august, unchallenged, and tranquil glories of the Victorian era, a time when England was totally unchallenged as a military force. Number 65. Albert Einstein. We tend to think of Albert Einstein as this vaulted genius who handed down theories and equations from on high. But he was nothing like that. Einstein didn't see himself as God's gift to intellect, but as an artist whose medium was science. Number 64. Hitchhiker. During the 1970s, one of the easiest ways to get around the country was hitchhiking, even if it was a little dangerous. Young people were drawn to the call of the 2-lane blacktop and the freedom that came with hopping in a random car and seeing where they ended up. Number 63. Geologist Thomas Griffin Taylor with meteorologist Charles Wright. Explorations of the Arctic were all the rage at the turn of the century. Explorers were competing with one another to be the first person to reach the South Pole, and in 1911, British explorer Robert Falcon Scott set out on the Terra Nova expedition to make his mark on history. Number 62. Charlie Chaplin in 1916. We tend to think of Charlie Chaplin as his most famous character, the Tramp, but he was nothing like the bowler hat wearing, down on his luck man that he portrayed on screen. He started his life as a boy in poverty, the son of a failing actress, but he quickly took to the stage and made his way to America from London. It didn't take long before he was a sensation. Number 61. Men of the Seaforth Highlanders resting with a dog in a trench. During World War I, every country in Europe did its part to fight against the fascist leanings of the Central Powers, essentially Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. The carnage and brutality of the war was unprecedented, and it thrust soldiers from many countries into a massive skirmish for which they weren't fully prepared. Number 60. Salvador Dali, standing on the deck of the SS Normandy. Salvador Dali is a timeless artist that never really feels in places at any decade. But in the early 20th century, he was turning heads with his surreal paintings and postmodern visual experiments. His early trips to New York City helped the artist form a broader idea of his art form and inspired him throughout the rest of his life. Number 59. 21-year-old woman operates a compressed air grinder. During World War II, men were pulled away from the armor in order to enlist in the fight against Japan and Germany. To fill the void left in the labor market, women took on jobs in manufacturing, utilities, and transportation. Number 58. Pablo Picasso. We tend to think of Picasso as existing on another plane of existence, a place where the bodies shift and the colors are unnatural yet comforting. He is never apart from his ability to create. However, that's not the case at all. Picasso loved to entertain guests and had friends from all walks of life. Number 57. Sophia Scholl, an anti-Nazi political activist. As a member of the White Rose Resistance, Sophie Scholl was one of the few Germans who worked against the Nazis out in the open, or as out in the open as she could. Her group was an underground nonviolent resistance movement who passed out flyers and passively resisted the Nazi movement. Number 56. Popeye. A leading stoker named Popeye with 21 years of service on board the battleship HMS Rodney, one of two Nelson-class battleships built for the Royal Navy in the mid-1920s. This guy clearly looks like Popeye the Sailor Man, a favorite cartoon character of people of all ages. But was the character based on him? Or is it just a strange coincidence that he looks just like the cartoon? Number 55. West meets East. Two German brothers, separated by the Berlin Wall, meet again during the Border Pass Agreement of 1963. Number 54. Blind Girl. This is a truly sad story, but luckily, it has a happy twist. Born on December 21, 1829, when Laura Bridgman was only 24 months old, she lost her sight, hearing, sense of smell, and most of her sense of taste after falling ill with scarlet fever. Number 53. A photographer uses his own backdrop to mask Poland's World War II ruins while shooting a portrait in Warsaw. By the end of World War II, much of Europe was in rubble, regardless of which side of the fighting they were on. Poland saw some of the most devastating destruction of the war, leaving the country a wasteland where once beautiful structures stood. Number 52. American soldiers watch as the tricolor flies from the Eiffel Tower. After 4 years of Nazi occupation, Paris was finally liberated on August 25, 1944. The writing was on the wall for German forces, so they didn't put up much of a fight when the French 2nd Armored Division and the U.S. 4th Infantry Division rolled into town to take back the City of Lights. Number 51. American troops of the 1st Infantry Division. Going into Battle of Normandy, a horrendous fight that lasted from June 1944 to August 1944, over the control of Western Europe, must have been a stomach-churning experience for these soldiers. Number 50. Crow Native Americans. Beginning in 1904, the Crow Fair is essentially a massive family reunion hosted by the Crow Nation as a way to bring together all Native American tribes of the Great Plains, calling tens of thousands of attendees from this great nation. Number 49. Drought Refugee. Drought refugee from Polk, Missouri with his son, awaiting the opening of orange picking season at Porterville, California in 1931. The Dust Bowl made Americans migrants in their own country, running from the devastation of their homes and farms to the Pacific coast in search of a seasonal job. These hard-working Americans were seen as nothing more than intruders who wanted to suck the government coffers dry. Number 48. Dutch resistance fighters. When Germany took over much of Europe at the onset of World War II, It was like a shock akin to being thrown into a cold bath. No one expected the Nazis to move as quickly as they did and with such brutality. Number 47. John F. Kennedy with wife Jacqueline Kennedy. It's no surprise that JFK and Jacqueline Bouvier had a storybook wedding. After all, they were America's couple. Stealing away to Rhode Island for their nuptials on September 12, 1953, they were the focus of media scrutiny the likes had never seen before. Number 46. Oscar Wilde. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, the early 1890s saw Oscar Wilde become one of the most popular playwrights in London. Well-known cheek and literary genius Oscar Wilde spent much of his time on Earth either writing brilliant works of salacious art or dishing out sass like he was getting paid for it. Number 45. King Ferdinand and Queen Marie of Romania. Born in Edinburgh in 1875, Marie of Romania was wed to Crown Prince Ferdinand in 1892. She gave up her life in the fields of England to become a beloved monarch in Eastern Europe. Researchers say that it's because of her that Ferdinand allied himself with the English against Germany. Number 44. Martin Luther King Jr. at the pulpit. Martin Luther King Jr. spearheaded the civil rights movement throughout the 1950s and 60s, delivering fiery speeches that called for the end of segregation, not through violence, but through loving your neighbor in spite of their faults, no matter how racist they may be, and turning the other cheek. Number 43. Senator John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. Quite possibly the most important Democratic National Convention that ever occurred happened in July 1960, when Senator John F. Kennedy scratched and clawed his way to a nomination for Democratic candidate with his brother at his side as campaign manager. Number 42. Princess Elizabeth, ambulance driver. During World War II, everyone throughout the Allied nations wanted to do their part for the war effort, even Princess Elizabeth. She wanted to be a part of the effort so badly that she spent months pestering her father to allow her to do something for her country. Number 41. Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. Rosa Parks was working long hours as a seamstress in a department store in downtown Montgomery, Alabama, when she boarded a bus on December 1, 1955. As the bus became crowded with white passengers, she was told to move to the back, but she stayed put and was arrested for the crime of sitting calmly in a seat while black. Number 40. Isambard Kingdom Brunel. This extremely self-assured looking guy is Isambard Kingdom Brunel, an engineer who devised the Great Western Railway, a network of tunnels, bridges, and viaducts that run across England and West Midlands. Number 39. Titanic Orphans. Brothers Michael and Edmund Navratil were the only children to be rescued from the Titanic without a parent or guardian. When the RMS Titanic went down in the Atlantic Ocean on the night of April 14, 1912, many children on board lost their parents to the waves. Number 38. The Russian author Tolstoy. Taken 2 years before his death, this photo shows Leo Tolstoy basking in the love of his family. His writing at the time dealt with his coming end and the way he believed that love was the most important thing to him in his final days. Number 37. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Taken only 1 year before he and his family underwent forced abdication, Nicholas II of Russia was away from the front during World War I. His absence from the center of the empire and his reliance on Rasputin caused political unrest among his country's people. Number 36. U.S. athlete Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens bolted to stardom during the 1936 Olympics that took place in Nazi Germany. At the time, the Amateur Athletic Union was unsure if American athletes should compete in Berlin. It was agreed that America would attend by a narrow margin, but Owens says that he didn't care about politics. He just wanted to show that he was the best of the best. Number 35. Rita Hayworth. Hayworth came into prominence during that strange time in Hollywood when starlets were stripped of everything that made them unique so they could be placed into any film that their contract requested. Number 34. A young Iranian woman hits the beach. Before the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Women weren't allowed to wear their traditional veils, and the police were ordered to remove any headscarves that they saw. At the time, women were excited about wearing westernized clothing, including jeans, miniskirts, and short-sleeve tops. Number 33. Grace Kelly. In 5 short years, Grace Kelly went from an unknown actress to one of the most sought-after stars in the world, and then she became a literal princess. She grew up the daughter of a 3-time Olympic gold medalist who owned a construction company worth millions, and a mother who was a champion swimmer and cover model. Number 32. Above the North Tower. The North Tower of the World Trade Center began in the summer of 1968. Construction of the South Tower began 6 months after that. Hundreds of laborers constructed it using American and Bethlehem steel. Number 31. New Prussia. During both World Wars, the Allied forces used a lot of propaganda to drum up support and get people to enlist in the military. This is a map that was released in 1916, implying what would happen if the Allies lost the war against the Central Powers. According to the map, most of the U.S. would be controlled by the Germans and be referred to as New Prussia. Japan would take the West Coast and call it Japonica. The Native Americans would get a small portion of New Mexico, Turkey would get Florida, and for some reason, Canada would become a lawless land run by barbarians. Number 30. Dunatar Castle. Since it was built in the medieval era, Dunatar Castle in Scotland has been reduced to ruins. It has been the hiding place of the crown jewels of Scotland when Oliver Cromwell invaded in the 17th century. It also served an important role in the Jacobite Rising 100 years after that. Number 29. The Tomb of Ramses II. Ramses II was a pharaoh of ancient Egypt, perhaps one of the most powerful and effective to ever rule the land. There were several monuments dedicated to his rule, built out of loyalty to him. His life was also incredibly long, with some historians believing he died in his early 90s. Number 28. A DC car crash. Automobiles became more widely used between the 1910s and the 1920s. And with that increase in cars came an increase in car accidents. The one pictured here is a colorized photo from 1921. Of course, there weren't any real safety features in cars yet. Number 27. Laika the Space Dog. Have you heard of Laika? She was the first animal to ever go into space. She was a stray in Moscow that was sent into orbit in 1957 by the Soviet Union as part of their space program. Unfortunately, Laika died a few hours after departure. A monument of her was later erected in Moscow to memorialize her. Number 26. Pablo Escobar at the White House. Pablo Escobar had a personal motto, Plata o Ploma, which means silver or lead. That speaks volumes for the drug lord's morals. Given that knowledge, that makes this image of Escobar at the White House all the more interesting. It's a little hard to believe someone as wealthy and powerful as him would have just been present for a regular tour. Number 25. The Dead of Antietam. 23,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing after 12 hours of savage combat on September 17, 1862. The Battle of Antietam ended the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia's first invasion into the North and led Abraham Lincoln to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Number 24. Abraham Lincoln. Matthew Brady first photographed Abraham Lincoln on February 27, 1860, the day Lincoln addressed a large Republican audience in the Modern Lecture Hall at Cooper Union in New York. Over the following weeks, newspapers and magazines gave full accounts of the event, noting the high spirits of the crowd and the stirring rhetoric of the speaker. Number 23. Bandits Roost. Residents of the alley known as Bandits Roost at 59.5 Mulberry Street in New York. Its nickname reflected the fact that it was the most dangerous spot in the neighborhood, which was notorious for high crime levels. Number 22. The Steerage. While sailing to Europe on vacation in 1907, Alfred Stieglitz took what many consider to be the first modernist photograph. It marks Stieglitz's eschewal of symbolist subject matter for that of everyday life. An image of steerage, the lowest priced quarters on the ship. Number 21. Romanov execution. The room where the imperial family and many of their servants were massacred on the night of the 16th and 17th of July, 1918. Number 20. Hitler at a Nazi party rally. Hitler, flanked by the massed ranks of the Sturm Altenburg SA, ascends the steps to the speaker's podium during the 1934 Harvest Festival celebration, Buckeberg. Number 19. Migrant mother. A mother looking off into the distance with two of her children at her sides and an infant in her lap. Her children's faces are not shown, as the children both bury their faces in their mother's shoulders. Number 18. Bloody Saturday. Chinese baby crying within the bombed-out ruins of Shanghai South Railway Station. The photograph became known as a cultural icon, demonstrating Japanese wartime atrocities in China. Taken a few minutes after a Japanese airstrike on civilians during the Battle of Shanghai, Hearst Corporation photographer H.S. Newsreel Wong did not discover the identity or even the sex of the injured child, whose mother lay dead nearby. Number 17. Jewish boy surrenders in Warsaw. This picture shows 7-year-old Zvi Nussbaum in the Warsaw Ghetto in 1943. The photo was taken by a Nazi photographer. There are conflicting accounts of whether this boy survived the war. Number 16. Flag raising on Iwo Jima. During the bloody battle for Iwo Jima, U.S. Marines from the 3rd Platoon, E Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Regiment of the 5th Division take the crest of Mount Suribachi, the island's highest peak and most strategic position, and raise the U.S. flag. Number 15. Mushroom cloud over Nagasaki. A dense column of smoke rises more than 60,000 feet into the air over the Japanese port of Nagasaki, the result of an atomic bomb, dropped from a U.S. B-29 superfortress on August 9, 1945. Number 14. Gandhi and the spinning wheel. Gandhi spins every day for 1 hour, beginning usually at 4. All members of the ashram must spin. He and his followers encourage everyone to spin. Number 13. The Burning Monk. An American journalist named Malcolm Brown captured possibly one of the most influential photos ever taken. The photo depicted a Buddhist monk sitting cross-legged in the middle of a Saigon intersection, engulfed by flames. Number 12. Saigon execution. 56 years ago, the national police chief of South Vietnam calmly approached a prisoner in the middle of a Saigon street and fired a bullet into his head. Number 11. The terror of war. Civilians were caught in between North Vietnamese soldiers who were trying to take control of the village and South Vietnamese troops who were defending it. One of the planes dropped a napalm bomb on North Vietnamese positions. However, the bomb mistakenly hit Trang Bang and civilians. Number 10. Munich Massacre. It was just after 4 a.m. when an attack that would shock the world began. Quietly, 8 men in tracksuits hopped the fence at Munich's Olympic Village, carrying with them Kalashnikov rifles and grenades in duffel bags. Number 9. Soweto Uprising. Soweto Uprising, student-led protest that began on June 16, 1976, in Soweto, South Africa, against the government's plans to impose the Afrikaans language as a medium of instruction in schools for black students. Number 8. Boat of No Smiles. 49 other sick or hungry refugees, half of them children, sat in silence or wept uncontrollably on the deck of the weather-beaten 30-foot fishing boat that had brought them from Phu Quoc off the west coast of Vietnam through the dangerous waters off Cambodia. Number 7. Germans attempted to get rid of laborers as the war came to an end. This is absolutely terrifying. During World War II, the Germans held everyone who wasn't a part of their country in contempt. They absolutely hated the Russians. Hitler desperately wanted to take the entire country by storm, turning it into a moral crusade. Number 6. A group photograph of Japanese officers. This shot of Japanese officers looks incredibly grand in gorgeous color, but the thing that really brings it all out is the composition. Number 5. Betty Page. Don't you just feel like you're on the beach? Check your shoes. Find any sand? We're so used to seeing Betty Page in her pinup photos that it's kind of a surprise to see her in such a candid shot, having a moment to herself as the waves crash in. Number 4. General Eisenhower. In the weeks leading up to D-Day to rally American troops, General Eisenhower gave a tremendous speech one day before the start of the month-long operation. He wanted to remind his men that they were fighting for the world, not just Europe. Number 3. Tunnel rats. The Vietnam War was one of the most harrowing and bloody wars of the 20th century. There were no good jobs during this war, but the most backbreaking and dangerous work was bestowed on the tunnel rats. A tunnel rat was the unfortunate name for soldiers who were tasked with performing underground search and destroy missions. Even if they succeeded, they were at risk of cave-ins, fires, or getting lost in a maze of tunnels. Number 2. Acrobats. This wild display of athleticism on the top of the Empire State Building isn't just impressive, it's dangerous. Acrobats Jarlee Smith, Jewel Waddick, and Jimmy Kerrigan twisted themselves into this pretzel-esque human statue high atop New York City on August 21st, 1934. 1. Poor young girl. This poor young girl, stuck outside in the rubble and the debris with nothing but a stuffed animal to keep her company. Hopefully, her family survived the Battle of Britain. She needs someone to look after her. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting us know which photo gave you the biggest chills. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the unknown.